I want to go over some basic safety techniques and tips for you and safety devices if you're using a table saw. A table saw is a wonderful tool, but it can be dangerous. Now, as always, if you like this video, we suggest that you hit the subscribe button, because then you'll see the future content that we put out. And if you'd like the video, that'll enable many others to hear about it who might also like it. But first of all, let's start with the basic crosscut. The crosscut is the safer cut on a table saw. And here you see that I have a miter in the miter gauge, and in a miter a piece of wood, and we just pass it across the blade which is spinning. The dangerous parts here are getting your hands into the blade. So you'll notice that this particular table saw has a throat plate that's red. That red is to indicate danger. You don't ever want to get a hand anywhere inside this red area. In fact, I think that's a little too close. So you would want to hold on to the push and keep your hands over to the left, and you would want to stay out of, you don't want to stand directly behind here, because it's always possible that a piece of this wood could chip off and come back and hit you. Now, you always have to have safety glasses on when you turn that saw on, or when you turn any saw on. These kinds of safety glasses are very effective to protect your eyes. I have had problems where I've gotten hit in the face by items thrown by the blade of a table saw. So I tend to go all the way with a full-scale mask like this one, which covers your entire face. So you need to decide which, but at a minimum, you have to use these safety glasses. So again, on the crosscut, the main thing you got to remember is don't stand directly behind the wood that's being cut, and keep your hands off to the side, whether you're cutting from this side or from this side. You do the same technique. But let's go to the more dangerous aspect of using a table saw, and that's where we do a rip cut. Now, a rip cut, we put a fence somewhere near the blade, and then we pass the item that we're the piece of wood that we're ripping into the blade lengthwise. This is much more dangerous than the crosscut, and we need to understand why. First of all, the blade is moving up, out, and down, but as the wood goes back to the back of the blade can tend to try to push the wood up and back into your face. That's a form of kickback, and you need to prevent that. The way to prevent that is with a push stick. Now, this push stick has a handle that slopes forward, which puts downward pressure on the wood, keeping it from lifting. And it has a small inset here in the back, which is what pushes the wood. So you see that you can push with this, and your hand never gets anywhere close to the blade. Again, you want to stand off to the side as you push this through, so that should something come back, it's not going to come back into your body, but it'll come back past your body. Now, if you have a wider piece of wood that you're ripping, you can use paddles like these, and they have friction on the bottom and handles on the top. And you put a couple of these paddles onto the piece of wood and push it through like this. This is not quite as safe, because you'll notice the geometry of my body compared to the wood that's being cut. I'm standing directly behind the wood that's being cut. So there is a possibility that something could come back and hit my body. You can also get into this geometry, and you have much less danger doing that. Now, another problem is that the piece of wood, as it passes through, if the distance from the blade to the fence here is greater than the distance from the blade to the fence in the back, then what's going to happen is the blade and the wood is going to get pinched between the blade and the fence, and it'll kick back. And it can kick back with enough violence to really do serious injury to you. So you need to carefully calibrate your fence so that this distance is at least as great as this distance in the front. I tend to offset it by a 1/64 of an inch back here to give me added safety. Finally, sometimes when you're ripping, you can be pushing the wood through and it'll tend to come out away from the fence. So ideally you would want to push in on the wood, but doing so with your hand means that your hand can first of all slip, or if you're not mindful, can go into the blade as the wood goes through the blade. So what I like to do is you can use a large push stick like this to hold the wood against the blade. I like to use this mag switch device, and this you can push tightly against there and it actually maintains some pressure, and then turn these magnets on and so it stays there. And so now as you push, there's no danger of the wood coming off of the fence and causing you safety issues. So again, I did this video without this on because it interferes with my voice and the sound recording, but I always have this thing on, and it's the most important safety thing you can do. If you don't want to go with the full mask, then you at least need eye protection with good safety glasses. Again, you can't get into too much trouble on a crosscut except getting your fingers in this red zone and thereby possibly cutting a finger off, or standing behind the wood that's going into the blade, in which case it could come back and hit you. The more dangerous operation is rip, and so when we're doing a rip, we want to make sure that the blade does not lift the wood and thereby kick it back into you. And the way we do that is with some sort of a hold down like this one, which provides downward pressure on the wood and allows a hook here at the back to force it through. You also need to hold the wood into the fence so that it doesn't come out from the fence. You can do that with this sort of a stick, which you could use almost any stick, or we just looked at these mag switch devices that go up against it. The other potential dangerous thing is to not have your blade and your fence aligned. And again, it's important that the distance from the fence to the blade in the front, that is this side, is greater than or equal to the measurement from the fence to the blade at the back. And as I stated, I like to have about a 1/64 of an inch wider in the back to make sure that it's completely safe. Now, I've talked about kickback, and I've mainly talked about it with regard to a rip. But on both a rip and a crosscut, there is a danger that if the wood that's going through the blade somehow has some pressure, some forces in it that tend to bring it together in the back, it could come together at the back of the blade and get kicked up. And so what we do about that, you may have noticed this black device here, it's called a splitter, and it sits behind the blade in line with the blade, so that as your wood goes over the blade, this fits into the hole that's being cut by the blade, and it keeps the wood from being able to come back onto the back of the blade and get kicked up into your face. So you need to have one of these. We would not want to run this saw without some kind of a splitter behind the blade. It's very dangerous. Now, this is not the only kind of splitter. And in fact, there's another type of splitter that's combined with another safety device, which I will now put onto the saw and show you. Bear with me a second here while I install this. So now you'll see that there is a splitter behind the blade, just like this black one. It's a bit bigger, but it's bigger because we've also mounted on it this blade cover. So now, I talked about the danger of getting your hand into the blade. If you now run with this on top of the blade, it greatly reduces the chance of you accidentally, even by slipping, getting your hand into the blade, because you really can't get past it. And it is designed so that it lifts as the wood passes through it, and even these side pieces lift as the wood passes through it. An added feature for ripping, safety feature for ripping that you'll notice here, are these things. These are called, and there's one on each side, these are called anti-kickback pawls. And what happens is, as the wood goes into the pawl catches, so that if you tried to pull the wood back, these little pointed edges here would catch on the wood and would prevent the wood from kicking back into you. But as you go this way, of course, that releases. So, as a beginner, I would recommend you always have a cover on the blade. We did most of this video without the cover on for clarity purposes, because you can't see the blade as well. But it greatly increases the safety factor for the table saw. So I hope you'll subscribe and look in on future videos, and I hope you'll hit the like button.